This is crack.
One thing that I love doing is watching PSAs. You know, from way, way, way back in the day. From the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s. You know, when the war of drugs was at its height. I think that we've all seen at least a few of these.
This is your brain. And this is heroin. This is what happens to your brain after snorting heroin.
It was a different time back then, obviously. Culture was all about family values, lowering crime, and marijuana was seen as a gateway drug to hell. You started that and you were well on your way to crack cocaine, speed, meth, and then the lethal injection. That's what our parents said at any rate, while they smoked their cancer sticks and drove down the road drunk. Things are different nowadays. Most of the country is on its way to legalization of marijuana. Oregon has even gone so far as to decriminalize all drugs, which is a stance, to be sure. It's not that these drugs are without negative side effects, but the more rational of us are more inclined to let people make their own choices on the matter. And of course, it's become clear that the punishments for nonviolent drug offenses are very often much worse than the actual drugs. These drug PSAs seem so corny in hindsight. They show a world of rampant paranoia and an almost childlike fear. Every story is a tragedy. Just once and you're dead. It got, for a lack of a better word, like a cartoon. To the point where they had actual cartoons telling you to stay off the pot.
I hate to suggest this, but my guess would be marijuana.
What they don't tell you, though, is that this kind of PSA stuff never really left. Yeah, they've actually been around all along. During the 90s, as the Amazon's deforestation became more and more of a pressing cultural issue, everyone was focused on saving the rainforest, shrinking that hole in the ozone layer, and protecting our planet. Most cartoons and sitcoms had at least one environmental episode, but there were shows and even entire movies based on this. We had Fern Gully, Once Upon a Rainforest, and most infamously, Ted Turner's creation, Captain Planet. How did that go?
Check him out, you're gonna see. He's the Mega Mac Daddy of ecology.
This man, who has 5 kids of his own, believed that he could stop overpopulation, which is a complicated issue, by telling 7-year-olds that they should stop having so many damned kids. As a show, Captain Planet was a good theme song. In hindsight, it's just about one of the corniest shows that I've ever seen, which is why I tend to clown on it at every opportunity that I can get away with. Unfortunately, PSAs got a lot less funny during the turn of the millennium. The 2000s brought on a new threat to the American consciousness: terrorism. PSAs became how there could be a bomb in every book bag, your neighbors could be plotting against you, and anyone with a foreign religion was a danger. While the issues of environmentalism, drug addiction, and terrorism are and were very real, PSAs often paint a very black and white picture of the world, and they often end up misinforming people more than they help. They're closer to propaganda than an actual public service. And today, especially in the realm of animation, they're getting another prominence, most infamously with Steven Universe. Today, a lot of them are about aspects of social justice, and I suppose this is a good disclaimer before we really get into the brass tacks of things. This is going to be one of those political episodes, and nothing is off the table. I'm going to be talking about some very controversial issues today, and my political opinions don't always align with the mainstream, as you probably realize this by now. The only thing I could promise to be is as honest and understanding as possible, and I ask you to do the same. We're gonna have to talk about the political opinions within these PSAs and deconstructing their arguments. There's no other way to do this. I respect you guys a lot more than just to make this episode about laughing at stupid corniness, but there will definitely be a little bit of that as we go forward. Some of the PSAs are outside of cartoons, like they made a commercial for it, and some of them are basically whole episodes. I'm going to be a little bit loose with the definition of a PSA. For instance, I consider the episode Let's Not Be Skeletons to be a PSA on gun control, even though it's another episode of OKKO, and not a PSA by the traditional definition. And speaking of politics and such, most of Hollywood and the animation industry by extension is left-leaning. Very far left-leaning. I don't think that's controversial to say. I think most people know that Hollywood is pretty far left. But it does mean that we're going to be pretty much only tackling left-wing arguments and stances. Maybe one of these days Tim Allen or Mike Rowe will make an animated show, or Mike Judge will do something other than keep trying to revive Beavis and Butthead. But until that day comes, most of the animation industry itself has a very unified voice. Please do not follow any cartoonists or voice actors on Twitter. You will come to hate everything about animation if you do that, no matter which side of the political aisle you're on. Buckle up. It's going to be a long, winding road today, and I think we need something really simple to get started with. What is the least controversial topic that we can start with today?
Global warming.
Okay, well, I'm fucked. It's all downhill from here, kids. This kind of PSA is pretty common, I'd say, as climate change becomes a more hotly contested political football. We don't get these kind of things as much as we did in the 90s, but every show needs to have an Earth Day special, whether it be SpongeBob or The Loud House. So, the greenhouse from The Loud House kind of blows. Like, really hard. Actually, that's a weird statement. The Greenhouse is a fascinating episode for someone who is not an environmental activist. It's bad, but it's fascinatingly bad because of how incompetent it is. You see, The Greenhouse from The Loud House showcases exactly why every single environmental PSA ever made has been completely useless in doing anything. I'm absolutely serious on this one. You want to know why environmental messages don't work? This is the episode why. For starters, you ever watch an environmental PSA that shits on renewable energy? And I mean, the episode has a good point here. It's not up to the kids whether their house is solar powered or powered by fossil fuels. That's their parents doing, which is kind of a problem for the plot, you know. You ever get an assignment at school where your success or failure depends entirely on other people, like your parents and your siblings and the size of your family? As shitty as my school was, I don't think I ever had that situation like Lincoln does in this episode. But I mean, it's accurate, because a single person can't really do much for or against the environment, especially if they're not rich. I love it, really, but yes, in this battle between fossil fuels and renewables, they both have issues and downsides. I don't know why this is contentious, why these are seen as a magic bullet, but both solar and wind power have issues. Neither of them are effective enough to meet current power demands with our current technology, and each of them actually do have environmental issues. Wind power requires clear-cutting forests and chops up birds like nothing else. Solar panels actually produce a ton of waste in and of themselves, and they must be replaced every 5 years. And we don't have a place to really store retired solar panels. And of course, the most common criticism brought up, which is what the episode goes with, is that sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun don't shine. While batteries exist, a constant flow of power is required in a developed nation. Because without the constant flow of electricity, people will die, as would happen during the cold snap that hit Texas last winter. The Texas thing became a flashpoint in the climate change debate. Both fossil fuels and windmills froze, and both sides are claiming that the other side is stupid. The actual issue is that Texas failed to winterize, because, and hear me out on this, when environmentalists claim that the planet is warming at an unprecedented rate due to fossil fuels, the last thing that anyone thinks to do is make sure that windmills in the desert that is Texas, which is a primary exporter of oil, can withstand heavy snowfall, climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it. I do believe is real. The evidence is obvious. But it's obviously a poorly marketed and poorly named problem. And the way we talk about it is completely wrong.
Remember, weather is not the climate, but the unprecedented cold weather in Texas is proof of climate change.
Science communication is a field that has been dead for decades at this point. We are in desperate need of a Bill Nye that hasn't gone fucking insane.
So, you guys, seriously, this next thing I feel is very special.
Cause my sex junk is so much more than either.
This song was nominated for an Emmy, by the way. At this point, I would like to formally nominate Genghis Khan for an Emmy, because he is just about as deserving as an Emmy as anything else the Emmys award and nominate these days. So, the greenhouse accurately showcases what's going to happen when any country goes green. Climate change is not an entirely environmental issue. It's a diplomatic one. In the episode, Lincoln makes his house go green. So everyone else in the class trying to stay green takes advantage of Lincoln. If you don't dig for oil in your backyard, you're gonna have to ask your neighbors for some. And you're gonna have to do just about whatever they say, no matter how immoral they are, because the demand for it hasn't vanished. The problem is, with current technology, renewables aren't as reliable as fossil fuels. So when a country does decide to go green, it lowers its own productivity, hurting it on the global stage. Other countries are incentivized not to go green, as it gives them an economic boom and more relative power on the global stage. Eventually, the polluters are going to dominate the global stage by polluting. Things like the Paris Accord only work if everybody plays together. In the current state of global affairs, everyone is not going to play together. When conservatives point to China and India, they aren't just whinging. By ignoring their impact, it incentivizes them to keep polluting, making them more powerful, making pollution more powerful. Because if you ignore eco-resolutions and regulations, you produce more. Your economic power boosts more. It creates a feedback loop, where the countries that ignore eco-regulations become the most powerful. It also severely hurts the developing world because industrialization is just about the only way that they can become developed. So this episode that says you should go green brings up another really good point against going green. Environmentalism is gross. Like, really gross. If you want an example, the pandemic of 2020 killed a lot of virtues, but I think that environmentalism was one of their first sacrifices. Wear a mask, make sure you don't use the same one twice in a row. Either dispose it, or waste a shit ton of water in between each use if you want to do this properly and safely. Throughout 2020, 1.5 billion masks have fallen into the ocean, and they tend to end up scattered across the ground as well. The overcleaning and the aerosols involved in sanitizing everything is bound to jack up the ecosystem. Even ignoring 2020 specifically, you shower probably every single day, which is more than you need to, scientifically speaking, and it wastes water. You also waste clean, fresh water every single time you flush the toilet. Like, every single day, you waste enough water for an entire family to survive on for a week. If climate change scientists and activists are right, flushing the toilet might be the sin that future generations try to erase us for when the water wars start. No, I'm not exaggerating. But you want to flush the toilet every single time you use it, never reuse dirty clothes, shower every single day, because it's all about feeling good. Why else would you be an environmentalist if it didn't allow you to feel good? Maybe because doing good is hard work and there's no easy way to morality. It can be very hard to be good and to have values, and I think that's something worth respecting. Keep wasting resources to keep your standard of living, and put the glass bottle in its proper bin to think you saved the world. Never mind that the bottle is full of ingredients that need to be shipped across the world by trucks, boats, and planes. It's reduce, then reuse, and then finally recycle. People don't want to reduce because no one wants a lower standard of living, and reusing things is disgusting. I love how this episode portrays this. Like, I'm not an anti-environmentalist, if that's even a thing, I just love how incompetent this episode is. Like, The Greenhouse almost feels like a deconstruction of environmental episodes. Like, it really shows the worst sides of going green. Which, I mean, points for playing both sides of the debate, I guess, but in doing so, they never make a good argument for why anyone should go green. In the episode, Lincoln and the class aren't interested in making an environmental change for the better. They're doing it for the selfish reasons of naming a polar bear. In this environmental episode, everyone only does environmentalism for their own selfish ends, to the point they take advantage of other people so they can claim to be environmentally friendly. And also, everyone is held up to the same standard, despite vastly different sizes of population. Which, once again, is accurate. Environmental regulations tend to hurt bigger families, which are usually poorer families because rich people tend to have fewer kids for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. And poorer families are disproportionately minority families. And yeah, that tends to be how eco-resolutions go. They treat every single situation exactly the same, even if it's unfeasible for some people to actually meet these resolutions. And they really, really fuck over the working class and the poor, which ended up sparking the Yellow Vest protests in France. It's like an episode on why environmentalism is a stupid fool's errand. But, I mean, climate change activists themselves have kind of convinced me of that. And what I'm about to say assumes that everything is honest and every single one of these studies is above board, where everything they say is completely 100% honest and truthful. The biggest proponents of climate change are climate change activists. They've basically been arguing unless we radically change how society is structured, we've got 12 years before the end of the world. Taking a step back from the panic, it's 12 years until climate change becomes irreversible or very much damaging. Either way, it doesn't really change how futile everything is. So, they have thoroughly convinced me, personally, that the only thing we could do in our fight against climate change is remove all funding to climate change research, environmental protection, and allocate it to surviving the oncoming changes. Because there's no way you're doing something that basically requires world peace to stop, and fundamentally changing the nature of the human race in a zodiac cycle. I mean, do you want to live in the 2020 lockdowns for the rest of your life? Because some environmental-obsessed governments are wanting to replace pandemic lockdowns with environmental lockdowns. And if you think that's a better life, please don't talk to me because I don't want to talk to you. If you want to improve the environmentalist message, the first thing you could do is kick these crazies off the stage. Because it's an alienating message that nobody wants to hear. Isn't that right, little Dickie?
It's time to stop!
When one of the most public figures in the climate change debate is a man whose only talent is pointing out how small his manhood is, can you really be surprised that people don't want to get involved in this? These are the kind of people who fight climate change. Yes, we must stop global warming to save the beaver baboons because they have huge anuses. If we lost those, it would truly be a tragedy on this planet. We must also save HPV, the disease that causes genital warts. And of course, we gotta save Kanye West. That dude is gonna be president someday.
Guys, everybody look into whatever the fuck Leonardo DiCaprio is always pushing.
Okay, first of all, that animation on Leo is terrible. It's not stylized at all like the rest of the music video, but yes, let's look at what Leonardo DiCaprio is doing because I'm tired of watching little Dicky hump the Pacific Ocean. In 2019, the year that this PSA was made, he had emitted up to 418 tons of CO2 by flying all over the world with his globetrotting. Meanwhile, in America, the country of excess, your average citizen emits 19 tons per year. Maybe people would take these activists like DiCaprio or John Kerry or Thunberg more seriously if they practiced what they preached. You cannot, and I repeat this, you cannot be an environmental activist and travel all around the world in planes and cars and stuff. The action is entirely contradictory with the belief. It's like being a vegetarian butcher, it doesn't make sense. Especially in an age with video communications. It's like saying that you're an animal rights activist while running a dogfighting ring, or saying that you care about people with autism while supporting Autism Speaks. Ahem. 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 Honestly, the biggest problem with the global warming debate is that it attracts people with a god complex. Who else has enough delusions to believe that they can change nature, human or otherwise? Which pretty much every single one of these environmental activists do have. Speaking of complexes, anything else you got to say, little Dicky?
We love you, India.
We love you, Africa.
We love you, China.
We forgive you, Germany.
I don't... Excuse me, what?
We forgive you, Germany.
Yeah, Germany. I know you had the whole Nazi thing, but we're cool now. So let's save the planet. What the fuck? What the fuck even is this? Yeah, I don't give a shit what the message is. I'm not gonna listen to anyone who drops a line like that. Especially since Germany hasn't exactly been the best in the fight against climate change themselves. Following the Fukushima nuclear disaster, Germany started reducing its nuclear power plants and opening up more wind farms. These wind farms couldn't meet energy demand and they had to start burning more fossil fuels, raising the country's carbon footprint. Because nuclear energy is literally the only way we will ever phase out fossil fuels, and environmentalists need to stop protesting it if they don't want to be hypocrites. Yes, nuclear energy has problems. It's either fossil fuels or nuclear, your choice. What's next? I'm done with this. Speaking of things that should have stayed in the 90s, the Animaniacs had a reboot. A lot of people really seem to like it. Then there are others, the people who notice that Dot is actually in this show. Not to, mansplain, but when the theme song says no mansplaining, you can't expect that to not rub people the wrong way. It's alienating, which is the last thing that you want to do in a theme song. Look, Dot was always a feminist character. People who say she wasn't never watched the original. But in the reboot, they did take her in a lot more of an abrasive direction. It's kind of the difference between third wave feminism and fourth wave, honestly. To put it short, in this version of Animaniacs, Dot is the character who will fight against gendered language while telling you to stop mansplaining, manterrupting, and having a mantrum. All while going after words like bossy that have no actual gender connotation. Dot's 90s feminism was self-assured, but in the modern incarnation, it seems like she's going specifically out of her way to piss off anyone with a different set of values. It's funny, their prediction song says the show was written in 2018 before it came out in 2020. However, it feels like it was written in 2016 and came out in 2018. This is the kind of show that came from the same writer's room as the Ghostbusters female reboot, I'm sure. Basically trying to start culture war crap for clapback points from the idiots on Twitter. What I'm trying to say is that the modern Animaniacs really wears its politics on its sleeve, and it doesn't do it any favors. Once again, Animaniacs has always been political. It's even been abrasive at times. What it hasn't always been is alienating. And the Animaniacs reboot finds itself in a time period when political tensions are worse than they've been in at least half a fucking century. Shows like this are bordering on irresponsible. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've had political riots and people trying to take over buildings to meet political ends. We do not need this kind of divisive bullshit! I don't know if it's a cause of our problems, but it's certainly not helping. Speaking of divisive bullshit, we gotta talk about gun control. Again. Oh no, I'm sorry. We have to talk about bun control. that is no, really. Excuse me for a minute. I must really process how intensely clever that pun was. You must be some kind of comedic genius to come up with that kind of intricate wordplay. No, seriously, Chaka Conroy is blushing at you masterfully changing the letter G to the letter B. What other kind of genius could think of something like that? The satire of this episode, if you could call it that.
The only thing biting here is the satire.
That's what they call it. Doesn't work because the scenario doesn't work in context.
Studies show that owners of multiple buns feel safer from the threat of other owners of multiple buns.
Look, skeleton remotes I could kinda get. You shoot them at someone and something permanent happens. It didn't really have a negative effect in the long run, but it was something permanent, I will give them that. A bunny, like a rabbit, unless you're a farmer or Elmer Fudd, isn't actually a threat to anyone. In a situation like this, you can't just preach to the choir. You have to be on your A game. You need to speak to the people who don't agree with you. And they're gonna point out this stupid writing right up front. And gun control is a very divisive issue. Actually, that's kind of getting to be less true. One of the odd little quirks of 2020, the year that this came out, it was a banger year for gun sales in the United States. Roughly 8.5 million people bought their first gun in 2020. And get this, mostly in liberal areas. You know, the people in this country that support gun control. Or used to, I guess. Gun control is a harder sell than it has ever been in a long time. And if you want to convince people to ban the things they literally just bought, you're going to need a damn good argument. And they do not have a good argument. This episode's brilliant solution to gun control is just do what Australia did, which is another thing that rings out like it came in 2018, but it was written in 2016. I feel like a robot for saying this, because the Australia argument is so well worn. I don't think that even gun control activists use Australia anymore.
Australia was already experiencing a decrease in gun violence before the ban, and the ban itself had no effect on the already downward trend. Beep boop, libertarian programming activated. During the 2020 COVID pandemic, Australians became unable to leave their country without express permission from their government, preventing many families from becoming reunited. Something that typically only happens in totalitarian countries like North Korea, forcing them to deal with some of the strictest authoritarianism and pandemic controls in the Western world. This is likely something that would not have happened in an armed populace.
And for the final bit of stupid, and I do mean that this is the most stupid part of the episode, because of how little they understand Australia at all. The Animaniacs try to get rid of buns by introducing a predator, dingoes. I want to show you guys something. This is the cane toad. Why am I showing you the pictures of a toad? Well, Australia had this problem with beetles eating up all of their sugarcane, so they introduced a predator to get rid of them. You know, Animaniac solution, introduce a predator to get rid of a problem. Unfortunately, cane toads had no natural predators in Australia, so the cane toads became a big problem as they devastated their ecosystem. And to add insult to injury, the toads didn't get rid of the beetles either. So in order to get rid of the gun violence problem in the United States, we must follow along the lead of Australia by introducing a predator into our ecosystem, which is known as one of the biggest mistakes in Australian history. Obviously not the absolute biggest sin Australia's ever committed. How they treated the Aboriginals takes the cake on that one. But, didn't this show used to be about 3 cat-dog things annoying a psychiatrist in an animation studio? Whatever happened to that? I don't know why they couldn't see through any of these implications unless they did, like, absolutely no research. Here's the thing about quote-unquote biting satire. It has to apply to both the real world and the scenario that the episode creates. This one is so magical that it manages to do neither, and it's a shame. This is the episode that's famous for that anime sequence, and I really do wish it was in another episode because it's a really good sequence, and it shows they really do understand the medium with countless references within just 2 minutes of animation. They understand anime way more than the problem of gun violence at any rate. Seriously, I've seen teenage screeds on Tumblr with a better grasp of the issue. So, your favorite show is having a reunion. It's been off the air for like a decade, but they're making a comeback. Just 1 episode. What are they gonna do? Maybe they'll have some big kind of adventure. Ooh, maybe the characters are older now. Maybe we'll see their deeper, more adult drama. Or maybe they're just gonna tell you how to vote. 16's a vote, dude, is one of the most awkward things that I have ever seen. and I personally feel bad for the fans of the show. I haven't spoken much about 16. I watched it occasionally, but at the time I was burnt out on Cartoon Network altogether. They were going down a dark path. Most of the original shows they had were mediocre to unbearable, like Squirrel Boy or the Cramp Twins. And in between that was not the best Canadian imports. I mean, Total Drama was an alright show for a season, but I had long lost interest in the show when this came out, and I wasn't going to be getting into something else by the same studio. But I know that 16 meant a lot to a lot of people. It had a much bigger audience in Canada, though. It was a Canadian production. So in 2018, the United States was getting into its midterm elections. You see, the way the United States works is that we have a presidential election every 4 years, but there are several other elections in between. And the most significant of those is the halfway point, where we have elections for many members of Congress and senators. And that gets to determine what kind of legislative branch that our president has to deal with. If the president is a Republican and the two houses of Congress are majority Democrat, it's unlikely that they'll be able to do much, or vice versa. Partisanship in this country is that bad. The last thing that Democrats and Republicans agreed to in the United States is going to war with Iraq, in 2003. Members of Congress will stick to voting in certain directions based on party in front of everything else, and opposing parties will do nothing but obstruct. So you may be wondering what the American midterm elections have to do with the Canadian television series that ran in the mid-2000s. No, I got nothing. This is one of the stupidest things they could have done.
Hey guys, wanna know what I just did? I just looked up how to register to vote.
And then I took the pledge to not have sex until after I got married. Same energy. Same fucking energy.
Have you seen what he's done today?
Who?
Trump! He's repealing the gun restrictions!
I reiterate, these characters are Canadian. They are Canadian within the short. They expressly state that. And the president can't just unilaterally repeal laws. I know that that's a joke, that we eventually find out that they are Canadian, but it doesn't work as a joke. The setup actually needs to make sense in the universe in which the show takes place. And I mean, it's not like you couldn't make this joke make sense. The most passionate person about American politics you will ever meet is probably a Canadian. But until the punchline, it's like they literally believe that they are in another country. And I know that Canada and the US look alike. Many people, even living in the respective countries, might not be able to discern a photograph between the two. But we are different countries, and we have different issues.
And now he's starting a trade war with Canada. I mean, who doesn't like Canada?
I'm guessing you guys don't, since you've apparently renounced all your Canadian citizenships. Like, this short goes on and on, showing about how all the characters have changed and giving a general update on their life. It's something that would have been nice if it wasn't mired in current political bullshit. I mean, 2 years on, and this midterm is a distant memory, so it comes across as awkward and outdated. The swearing doesn't help much either. Also, they keep using the word millennial over and over again. Number one, I don't think that term even existed when the show came out. It definitely wasn't in widespread use. But here's the, fun fact. If you turned 18 in 2018, you're not a millennial! You're a member of Generation Z, or Gen Z, whatever. No, not that Gen Z. We do not speak of that Gen Z ever. This whole thing really does feel like it's concentrated. Hello, fellow kids!
You doofuses know we can't vote in the US election, right? We're Canadian!
Like, here's another thing about this punchline. If you do care about American politics at all, you'll know how disrespectful this is. Since 2016, foreign election interference has become a very real concern in the United States. And it's not something that Americans would find a laughing matter. Doesn't matter if it's Russian, Chinese, Venezuelan, or Canadian, it's not funny. And it's quite tone deaf on some American citizens' actual concerns. This message is approved by Ronald Reagan. What's next, Arthur? How bad could it be?
So, what have you been up to lately?
Good fucking lord. What the hell happens to the animation? This looks like a 90s edutainment game. No, wait. The Arthur games from the 90s look better than this. Oh yeah, Arthur went to Flash animation for some reason I can't understand. It used to be hand-drawn, and it had a lot of personality that was reminiscent in the original Arthur books. Look, I know the PBS is publicly funded, but this kind of animation quality is not acceptable. Anyway, what's Arthur trying to teach people to do today? Is it about how stealing is wrong, or how you should tell the truth, or...
Ooh, Trey chic.
Oh good, it's a pandemic safety PSA. Well, this isn't going to shoot my career in the foot again. We're really doing this again. Do I have to?
Yes.
Like, people know what I think on this, and they don't like what I think about this.
If no one ever gave an unpopular opinion, where would your species be as a whole? If you personally suddenly stopped talking about this issue just because you didn't get a response of sunshine and rainbows, what would it say about you and what you truly believe in? If you believe that you are right, it is a duty to continue to speak up, no matter what the consequences are. You must remember that this is who you are. This is a feature, not a bug of who you are. And it is an important feature. The most important feature.
I know that. It just seems so futile, so pointless. Like, can I ask a question here? Is literally anything I say going to change anyone's mind? Just one person. Because I'm getting tired of speaking into the void. Seeing people literally comment that they are okay with other people committing suicide if that means that they personally don't have to get sick, even if they are not in an age group where they are at significant risk of any complications. I spent my first years on this platform telling people that going massively into debt for college might be a bad idea, and they just looked at me like I was telling them that magic existed. Now, we have people with like PhDs and master's degrees serving Starbucks, wondering where their life went wrong. But like the possibility that college might not be the right path for them, or that getting a degree in bullshit doesn't automatically guarantee them a good job, was a complete unreality, and a teenager going to college was just as scientifically certain as the sun rising in the morning. And a country going into lockdown when they have an outbreak of a disease, despite not being recommended by health authorities past or present, is just as scientifically certain as entropy. Our pandemic efforts in 2020 convinced me of only one thing. We are doomed as a species. Doomed to do the song and dance every fucking time. Maybe burning witches is a bad idea. No, if we don't, God will condemn us. Maybe manifest destiny is a bad idea. No, see the shining sea. Maybe interning the Japanese is a bad idea. No, we need to be safe. Maybe the war on drugs is a bad idea. No, we need to be safe. Maybe the war on terror is a bad idea. No, we need to be safe. Maybe lockdowns are a bad idea. No, we need to be safe. I'm just starting to wrap my head around us doing this about once a generation until I'm long dead. Or, who knows, maybe this war on death will be far, far more successful than the war on drugs, or the war on terror, or the war on poverty. A lot of people wonder what's going to cause the end of the world. You know, many people claim nuclear war or global warming, or maybe an asteroid. Let me get rid of all of those fears. I know exactly what's going to kill off humanity. Humans will kill the human race. That is an absolute certainty at this point. And no, I don't mean by nuclear war or conquest, just the opposite really. The human race will destroy itself trying to save itself. Because it's more and more apparent that the human desire to save itself is one of the most destructive forces in the entire universe. What was I talking about again?
The Arthur Mask PSA.
No, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about how nothing I say on this is going to matter. I'm not usually a determinist, but this is proven to be futile. I could say gloobity globbity glorp, and it'd be worth that fucking documentary I made that had over 150 sources. I mean, even if I shot with their side on this one, they still wouldn't listen to me. I mean, I could say that the science of this PSA is outdated, and apparently now you need to wear 2 masks. Even if you're vaccinated, which is great incentive to get vaccinated, by the way, guys. Does it matter that many countries and states who had mask mandates actually had an increase in cases? Or that plenty of places that got rid of mask mandates saw a drop in cases, like recently Texas? Nope, science avoids evidence. And it's not worrying at all that a Dutch study that talked down the effectiveness of masks was afraid it couldn't find a publisher, because consensus is the most important thing to science. That's why we know that the sun revolves around the earth. Science should never be controversial ever. And I get it, I really do. We all need to have a completely unquestioned priest or preacher who is infallible no matter how many times that Fauci's lied. Masks, asymptomatic spread, herd immunity percentage.
When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
That even if there is some asymptomatic transmission, in all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always a symptomatic person. Even if there's a rare asymptomatic person that might transmit, an epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers.
Those are 3 major times that Fauci has lied. There are dozens and dozens of other times where he has, to put it as generously as I can, flip-flopped. If you want to listen to an avowed failure and an active liar, that is completely up to you. You can do what you want. I mean, even if masks do nothing, they don't have any negative effects. You know, besides the excessive police brutality all across the world, getting people to turn on each other, psychologically damaging children, forcing people to undergo previous trauma, an environmental disaster unlike the magnitude of anything we've ever seen before, discriminating against the mentally ill. Oh, and Canada recalling masks that contain graphene, which Canada more or less mandated people to wear, because there are health risks associated with graphene. You know, graphene, something that Google, the greatest scientific authority in the world, was pretty confident in until the start of April. Yeah, who knew? Graphene causes lung toxicity in animals, but I'm sure it's safe to use on children like Canada forced them to do. One of these days, you follow the science people should look up thalidomide and see what happens when you use these medical advancements and apparati without proper testing. Be warned, the pictures can be considered quite disturbing. Children born without limbs often are. But I get it, we all need a security blanket or a teddy bear, or else we just don't feel safe. How else would we constantly remember that we could all die at any given minute? You know, one of the reasons that I tend to avoid stores and shops that require masks? I mean, the biggest one is that they cause me sensory overload, and we as a species have decided we collectively don't care about mental illness anymore. It's because these stores often avoid social distancing protocols, and even the CDC has said that masks are not a substitute for social distancing. You're only supposed to use them in places which you can't social distance, like the grocery store or school. You know, the place that we've closed down. Except for private schools. You know, where the rich kids go. Because we've also given up trying to care about income inequality as well. According to this PSA, because Muffy is wearing a mask, it is absolutely okay for her father to have this big blowout sales event for cars, which will most likely encourage a mass gathering. The most essential thing to buy in a pandemic. This goes on without any sort of shaming or criticism whatsoever. Really responsible to encourage mass gatherings, Arthur. You got any other pieces of advice?
If we all do our part, we can get rid of this virus.
You disgust me, viscerally. Let me be the bearer of bad news, Arthur. COVID is endemic. We're not getting rid of this virus entirely. The best we can do is defend against it. In all of human history, we've only eradicated one virus. That was smallpox. Nowadays, it only exists in a lab, and that's after we got a vaccine and 200 years for a virus that's less infectious than COVID. Seriously, if you fuck around in the Arizona desert, you could still get the Black Plague. You know, the one that killed like a third of the world's population. We've still got leprosy, measles, malaria, mumps, swine flu, bird flu, even the 1918 flu, and even polio. We were pretty close to getting rid of that one until we as a species figured that we had something better to do. PBS, if I can ask you to do one thing, it wouldn't be to improve the animation, it wouldn't be to check your morals, it would be for you to stop lying to children. I'm just wasting my breath and making my throat sore for no reason. It's a moot point anyway. Everything I just said means nothing to no one, just like virtually every fucking wear a mask statement that's ever been said. All of it amounts to a grand total of shit! We've learned this with abstinence-only education. Just telling people to do something like this has a backfire effect if it does anything at all. Like, when Bill Nye tells you to wear a mask, it would be a lot more effective if he didn't come across as this miserable person while doing it. But no, it has to be different this time because we really want it to be different this time. That should make it scientifically different. No, all this abstinence only, mask PSA, makes you look like an asshole or a clown. You know, especially if you do something like recommend a face mask during sex like the UK did, or wear a mask in between bites of food like California did, or, you know, wear 2 masks after being vaccinated. Which doesn't make you look like you're taking the pandemic seriously. It makes you look like a fucking joke. And by extension, it makes masks look like a bigger joke. Because I personally would take you a lot more seriously if you just wore the fucking clown nose. What's the story been since Fauci flip-flopped? That's right, wearing one mask is all it takes to basically save lives. One mask is a perfect magic bullet. Here's the funny thing. If wearing 2 masks is really important, that means that every single time you've only been wearing one mask, you've been spreading the virus. But I guess that's not a problem, unless you've assumed that the mask is 100% effective at any point in time. Meanwhile, because I am skeptical of masks, I have basically just stayed home and ordered things online and stayed away from other people. It's been hell on my psyche, and the walls in my house move every single day. But this is how you properly social distance. Whether masks work or they don't, my conscience is clear. How about you? Because if this does turn out to be security theater, it can have a major backfire effect. So you better hope, for your sake, for all of our sakes, that one mask is effective enough. Instead of, you know, all of our protocols and all of our advancements being so useless you still need to do all of this shit even after taking a vaccination. But hey, at this point, if you don't want to question the theocracy, that's totally fine. I don't discriminate against other religions. But I'm done pretending to take this debate seriously. Children were mandated to wear masks that may have given them lung toxicity. You have lost the fucking argument and any moral standing you have. Sure, masks, lockdowns, whatever. Maybe they're effective at stopping COVID. I mean, all of the evidence basically says no. But let's pretend, because pretending makes us feel so good. And feeling good is just so much more important than doing good. Feeling good should just literally be the only thing that matters, no matter if we're actually doing good or actually hurting people. Let's hope that the future you're building is worth its weight in lives. Even toying with the idea of vaccine passports, which was said to be conspiracy nonsense last year, says no. Has Arthur done anything else? Because this debate just gets me in such a foul mood.
I can't believe someone would be hurt like that, just because they're black.
So, I'm going to need you to point out the problems with Arthur tackling this particular subject matter. If you don't get it, let me explain. In Arthur, the characters, don't have race. They have species of animals, yes, like aardvarks and rabbits, but you'd have to be MatPat to assume that they had an in-universe reason. This is a conscious choice that many shows made back in the day to make race irrelevant in their world. It was one of the main reasons that shows used anthropomorphic animals. There are no black people in Arthur's universe because there are no people of any race in Arthur's universe. We can see this also in things like Doug, where all the characters are Technicolor specifically for this reason. It's something that even happens to this day. Frisk is yellow in Undertale as well to take race out of the equation.
It's not enough to just say, I'm not racist. It's not my problem. We have to actively fight against racism.
So we get to our final stop on this train. So, in late May of 2020, a man named George Floyd was killed in the hands of police officers. It became another example in a long line of incidences of police brutality aimed specifically at minorities. But this was a tipping point for many. Protests and civil unrest sparked all across the United States, sometimes ending up as riots. They continued for over 100 days, and there was a sense of outrage among the country. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the situation, and as I record this, the trial is ongoing. The full-body camera footage was actually leaked to the public sometime later, and it mired the situation quite a bit, as well as Floyd having a controversial past, but you'd be hard-pressed to believe that he or Breonna Taylor or any of the other numerous individuals who have been shot and killed by police deserve to die. In cases of actual crime, the police are there to apprehend and not to execute. This is a very serious discussion that could probably take up a full video that I'm not entirely comfortable making, but it gave rise to mantras of all cops are family-unfriendly expletive, and silence is violence. And in the animation realm, we got a whole host of PSAs. It feels like we got the entirety of the drug war PSAs all in 1 month. And I hate to be the one to say this, but they're all about as good as the PSAs against drugs.
Talk about racism with your friends, your parents, your teachers.
Hey Fred, we're about to play some Mario Kart, you want in? Sure, but I think we should talk about how predominantly black schools are underfunded due to a systemically racist Department of Education. Okay Fred, not this again. We're trying to play a fucking game here. Racism is definitely a bad thing and an evil in this world, and it should be fought against. However, not every single person or weapon is equally useful in this attempt. For example, Barbie. Barbie wants to tell you all how bad racism is. Yes, Barbie. The doll. The doll.
Hey, everybody.
Oh god, another one of these things. Okay, maybe animated characters should not vlog. Like, seriously, it's weird as hell seeing a cartoon character stare awkwardly at the camera. They're not supposed to do that. 2D or 3D, it barely works in live action. For vlogging to work, you need to be really expressive. And this stilted animation just makes it look uncanny, like a Barbie doll. This PSA has a problem that the Arthur one does, which is why I'm tackling them next to each other.
People might think that my life looks fine, but the truth is, I and so many other black people have to deal with racism.
Now, here's something that I don't know if you've noticed, but this character is, well, a fictional character. Their entire life and every experience within is completely made up. I can show you my character and say that she's had to go through X, Y, and Z as a girl and that sexism is bad, but it doesn't change the fact that I made them up, both the character and the sexism that she's been exposed to. In both of these PSAs, they talk about fictional examples of racism. The Arthur one is more close to what actually happened, but it's so vague that you'll only know what he's talking about if you actually directly know about George Floyd. Meanwhile, hell, not only is the Barbie one made up, it's completely off-screen. It's one thing if it's like in the context of an episode about racism, but these are coming off like actual people trying to talk about a real-world issue, when they're clearly and patently making shit up. If the problem is bad, and the problem is bad, you should not need to make up fictional examples. All it does is dilute the problem, and look like you're making it a bigger deal than it really is. Once again, if they did like an actual episode about this, I wouldn't have much of a problem. But no, these PSAs are about fictional events, and they're talking about them as if they actually happened in everyday reality. It's okay if an actual human vlogger in the real world talks about this, like, okay, I don't know any vloggers. Let's say Oprah starts a vlogging show. She can talk about any racism that she's experienced with credibility because she's a real person. We can assume that she's honest about her life experiences, and we're to assume that her stories are true. Especially because there are real-world consequences if the stories are not true. Like when Jussie Smollett made up a fake hate crime. Fake hate crimes, even in terms of a PSA, only undermine the actual problem. You can make like 50 million PSAs about any problem you want, real or not. Like, the moon is gonna crash into the earth, and we have to do something about it. You could make as many PSAs as you want about it, and it would be on the same level of these racism PSAs, despite one problem being real and another one being clearly science fiction. Give some of those drug PSAs credit. They often talked about what would have happened if you took drugs, not what did happen to fictional characters. Although, yes, some of them did fail on that regard, but, like, not one of these racism PSAs even takes that step. This is my biggest issue with the whole silence is violence mantra. It's not that you're compelling certain people that they have to speak up if they don't want to be branded a racist. It's because some people should shut up because they're stupid, and anything they say can actually hurt the fucking cause. There's actual racism in this world. If you deny that, you're a moron. But if you feel the need to make shit up, you're worse than a moron. We shouldn't have to make things up to tell the full story. And speaking of that, it's the moment that you've all been waiting for. Steven Universe, our grand finale. After June of 2020, Steven Universe made a bunch of PSAs, despite the fact that the show was actually over by that point. It's not as awkward as 16 coming back a decade later, but it still raised a couple of eyebrows. There's actually 6 of them by my last count. 3 of them are about racism, and they've teamed up with Dove to do 3 more self-esteem and body positivity PSAs. Dove, if you don't know, is a company that's so woke it had an ad of a black woman turning into a white woman in 2017. That wasn't so long ago. If you said something of that caliber in 2017, you'd be canceled by now. Anyway, the PSAs.
Who am I to say what an improvement is? Especially when it comes to something as personal as a gem's own form.
Got it, kids. Don't criticize shapeshifters. But the other Dove one, the one about social media, is actually pretty decent. Credit where it's due. You don't have to be on social media, and there can be positivity if you do know where to look. I wish a lot more PSAs were like this, to be honest. I mean, the third Dove one is okay too, but once again, the alien stuff kind of gets in the way. Like, most people's bodies aren't too different. I mean, we don't have many people running around with 3 arms or being 20 feet tall, but I get the idea. That being said, I get the idea behind the racism ones too. Let's do Pearls first. Each PSA follows the same format. They're about to follow a traditional PSA, but they break the fourth wall to talk about, let's say, something else. Pearls is the one that's most widely talked about because it most obviously gets facts wrong. And it's been so well worn that I don't think I have to get too deep into it. Like, you could probably go deeper into the facts about this on someone else's video.
Are we going to ask why kids are apparently learning about Thomas Edison?
Honestly, I don't get the battle that they chose to fight here. Thomas Edison's fame has waned over the years. He ain't as popular as he used to be, and in most online discourse at least, he's known as a con artist. Like, Thomas Edison patented a lot of ideas from Nikola Tesla. He also killed an elephant. So you'd be hard-pressed to find a person today who thinks as highly as they did of him even back in the 2000s. Thomas Edison certainly had contributions, but the Wizard of Menlo isn't all that magical these days.
There were black Roman warriors, black medieval knights, black classical musicians, black cowboys, black fighter pilots. Where are they?
Okay, so I guess that you're in a world history class and not an American history class, which usually starts with the Fertile Crescent. You know, in Africa and the Middle East. Actually, hell, I don't even remember learning about the Roman warriors until I took Latin class in high school. But whatever. Even ignoring that, history gets truncated in classes. Like, even the big events, like World War II, we don't learn every single nuance. Like, it's pretty bad when a channel called Oversimplified goes into more detail about major historical events like the American Civil War than our own actual education system does. But second of all, and more to the point, I don't know about whatever school you're teaching, but my school actually did go into black musicians. We learned about the Harlem Renaissance, the invention of jazz, Louis Armstrong, all of that. Like, I'm genuinely curious here. Did they take that stuff out of the textbooks and I just don't know it? Or maybe it's a regional thing, like how deep Texas gets into the Alamo? Because I distinctly remember learning about that. I mean, we learned about the Civil Rights Movement. I even learned about Jesse Owens, the black athlete who won 4 gold medals in the 1936 Olympics. You know, the one hosted by the Nazis. As for the Roman warriors, yes, there were black Roman warriors because their society wasn't race-based, and they conquered parts of Africa. This means, in addition to having black Roman warriors, the Romans also had white slaves. Look, sorry, they told me to tell the whole story, so I'm just doing what they said.
I worry about you humans because you only live, what, about 100 years?
Haven't you been on this planet for like 600? Why haven't you done anything about slavery or civil rights or anything like this? I reiterate, having a fictional character make a PSA about this kind of thing is stupid, especially when in-universe they have the power to actually do something about it. But no, Pearl is just gonna sit back and watch for hundreds of fucking years and then shame us about her inability to do shit.
Was this modified to make white readers comfortable?
Yes, my school made us watch the film Roots when we were learning about when our American forefathers partook in the atrocity that is slavery to make us more comfortable as white people. We learned about the Trail of Tears, read Farewell to Manzanar, you know, the book about the internment of the Japanese citizens during World War II. We learned about the American Civil Rights Movement with the Alabama bus boycott and the teachings of Martin Luther King, and how they got blasted by fire hoses for trying to earn their rights. And yes, while a lot of individual accomplishments by individual people have been sidelined, I never got the impression that my history class is trying to make me feel comfortable as a white person. Wherever that fucking notion came from. American history had a lot of race-based atrocities, which are repeatedly taught to us throughout our entire education. Alright, Garnet, you're up next. Hers is probably the least out of all of them. It's bad for the reasons that the drug PSAs were.
Stuff like this doesn't actually happen in real life.
Whoa there.
Are you kidding? It totally does.
Just because this has never happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. Seriously, I didn't know.
Stuff like this doesn't happen. Actually, it does. Whoa, I had no idea. I'm sorry. If you've managed to convince anyone on Earth to not be racist this easy, please let me know. Like, seriously. From what I understand, actual racists are kinda more entrenched in their fucked up beliefs. And it takes more than a slight scolding to get them out of it. I mean, if it's this easy, I guess people just don't want to try to fight racism. Seriously, I want to live in your world where all of this is this simple. Man hates black person for 50 years, but just talk to him for 2 seconds, and he's a changed man. See what I'm getting at? It's not that simple. And the cartoon that these characters live in is not our world. Amethyst, last chance here. What do you got for me? Sea color. Oh, this is going to be something.
Whoa. Hold up a minute here. Ugh, who wrote this? I think it kind of does matter that I'm purple.
Alright, where are you going to go with this?
Well, I'm not an alien, but it definitely matters to me that I'm black. Yeah, it makes a difference that I'm white.
All of these PSAs, they're giving me like some serious r/woke kids vibe. You know, where these Twitter people post stories of how their 5-year-old that doesn't exist stood up to a teacher's racist rant that would have gotten them fired, and then everybody on the bus clapped because kids don't talk like this. They don't talk about this kind of stuff. They don't talk like this.
I just think it's messed up to compare me being an alien to you two being different races.
Why are you looking at me? Was anyone comparing black people to space alien? I mean, I agree that's kind of fucked up. It sounds like some the elites are lizard shit, but I haven't noticed anyone but you doing that. Is this some kind of major problem that I'm unaware of? Is there this massive swath of people who are comparing people of different colors to being aliens from outer space? Because that's a new one to me.
Adding purple people into a lesson about human racism makes no sense.
Like, I could deconstruct these arguments, but I'm just baffled. Who else is comparing human races to purple aliens with the Crooniverse here? I mean, there is this trope about aliens in fiction take on ethnic stereotypes, you know, like Jar Jar Binks, but is someone who isn't completely off the deep end comparing black people to space aliens in earnest? But I agree, this is a problem that we have to stop, like right now. It is the most important thing we should do in this war on racism. We have to tell people to stop comparing ethnic minorities to space aliens. I mean, I always thought that stopping police shootings, or the racially biased justice system, or black majority schools being systemically underfunded were more pressing issues, but you have convinced me. We really need to stop people from comparing black people to space aliens. It is the most pressing issue in the black community right now. And then we get the very, very problematic tagline. Can I just say that this is ableist to colorblind people and go home?
No, it is incredibly important to deconstruct this very toxic message.
Okay, so what's the difference between not being racist and being anti-racist? Because, believe it or not, there is a difference. And this is where things get dirty. Anti-racism is actually this big, complex thing with a lot of nuances. Surprisingly so, considering the term. But it goes beyond just not being racist. If you just don't be racist, anti-racist people think you're ignoring the problem. And by ignoring the problem, you are a part of the problem. And you might as well be racist. Being anti-racist means that you need to look at a black person and assume that they have a bunch of cultural baggage thrown on them for the sake of being black. Doesn't matter if it's a black homeless person on the street or Obama. See color. What do you think that means? What else could it mean? Unless you believe that there is one unifying feature or experience that affects every individual member of a group, that individual experiences don't exist. Anti-racism isn't anti as in antibacterial. It's anti-racism like anti-villain, where the person in question is still a villain. They're just being villainous towards a bad person. Anti-racism is being racist, but in a positive direction. That sounds a little bit fucked up, don't you think? And I'm betting a good deal of you guys don't believe me on this one. I want to tell you something. Last year, California had a proposition ballot, Prop 16. The media reported on it as the affirmative action bill. What it would do, and all it would do, is repeal Prop 209. What is Prop 209? Proposition 209 prevents state discrimination based on sex, race, or ethnicity. And in 2020, the most left-leaning state in the nation put up a proposition bill to basically repeal their civil rights law. Voting yes on Prop 16 is what is demanded and required to be anti-racist. If Prop 16 passed, someone could easily have a whites-only restaurant, and it would be legal under California law. But no, it's about affirmative action. It's about giving downtrodden people a leg up, so you can feel good and appeal to your white savior syndrome. Prop 16 didn't pass, by the way. It was close, 57% to 43. I absolutely understand that there are black people who've had experiences that I could never imagine going through. I know this because I talk to them and treat them as individuals. Same with Asians, Indians, Hispanics, Polynesians, Native Americans, so I can understand their worldviews better. But no, you people want to take a shortcut and assume that all of these people have had the same life experiences, which strikes me as kinda racist. You know who's very good at seeing color? You know who does it a lot? It's actually their primary feature, the alt-right. Their entire political ideology is about seeing color, and these kind of PSAs might just be good recruiting tools for them. I am so glad that they've gotten the pushback that they have, because quite frankly, a lot of what I've talked about today is disgusting. This especially. I'm sorry if you thought that this was going to be like the, let's mock the silly PSAs that are cringy and don't understand reality. But no, like, these bad PSAs are something else. I'll end it with this. Discrimination is bad. I don't know what else to say. Like, throughout my entire life, that has been my thought process. That has been the world that I've grown up in, and that has been my moral value. Discrimination is bad. If you think anything else, I believe you are an immoral person. Like, here's the thing. Some of the most racist shit that I have ever seen and heard has actually come from anti-racist activists. Like, there was this big story last year. The Smithsonian National Museum of African American History had a chart last year. It was controversial because it was on whiteness. And I can't put this on this video because it is one of the most racist things that I've ever seen. Not towards white people. It was racist towards black people. They literally stated that things like having a plan for the future, believing hard work is the key to success, and objective, rational, linear thinking, and viewing time as commodity were all a part of whiteness, as intrinsic to white people and no one else. It is clear to me, undeniably, that racism is alive and well. Unfortunately, it's endemic in the people who are claiming to fight it. A lot of this stuff from these anti-racist activists sound almost exactly like what I hear from the alt-right. And I would not be surprised if the people who made the Arthur or the Steven Universe or the Barbie PSA believe this shit. When these people say to see color and want to remove laws that protect minorities, I don't think they have anyone's best interest at heart, except their own. And it feels like they've hijacked a movement for something incredibly awful. Racism is bad. Discrimination is bad. And that should not be a controversial statement. I personally stand against racism of all stripes, of any political affiliation. Left, right, I don't care. History has a funny view of all of us, and we'll see how things are judged going forward. But remember, every single PSA stood against drugs in the 80s and 90s. None of them said that they were good or that you should take them. They were the worst things ever that would destroy your life completely. 20 years later, and at least one state has decriminalized all drugs. Marijuana, the gateway drug, is fully legal in many states. These PSAs were corny, they were over the top, and they failed to understand their own issues that they were talking about. They had nothing for nuance. And that hasn't changed in 40 years. And slowly, but surely, people turned away from the PSAs of old. I can't say for sure that they caused the cultural changes that came along, but I can certainly say they didn't stop culture from making a 180. These are real issues that PSAs simplify into cartoons and sound bites. But we live in a world of reality, and things are never straightforward or simple, and pretending that they are only leads to bad results. The biggest fear I have going about this episode and doing all this research, the one thing I desperately don't want, is for us to look back at the message of don't be racist the same way we look at this is your brain on drugs. And it's scary that this is a very real possibility. Whatever side of the aisle you're on, whatever you think of me, please do your best out there to be a good person. Like many of these activists and PSAs, I'm not going to pretend that it's easy, but it's something that's well worth doing. And we need a lot more good people out there. And always try to stay honest with yourself. Keep questioning and just try to do good. Genuine good. Don't take the easy way out. So, little robot dude, you got anything?
My name is Al, like it says on my body.
I think that's AI.
I have robo-dyslexia. Lowercase L's look exactly like uppercase I's to me, but I am fairly sure that my name is Al.
Okay, Al. Anything you got?
This whole thing makes me think of a C.S. Lewis quote.
Is it the one that I'm thinking of?
Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell of earth. This very kindness stings with intolerable insult. To be cured against one's will and cured of states which we may not regard as disease is to be put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, or those who never will. To be classed with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals.
Yeah, that's the one that I've been thinking of for a good long time now. Let's hope for a better tomorrow, Al.
Indeed.
And I'll see you all next time.